Hello everyone. So today we are back with another lecture that is on SQL and MySQL. Till now we have learned about DBMS, then RDBMS, terminologies in RDBMS, its key concepts. We have learned about 4 different types of keys, which are primary key, candidate key, foreign key and alternate key. Now we are going to work on SQL and then we are going to learn about MySQL. So basically, what is SQL? As you all know that we are saying that we have to work on SQL, we have to learn SQL. Now, what is SQL? So SQL is structured query language. It is structured query language. Not structured, not structural, not any other form. It is structured query language. Why it is a structured query language? As I told you earlier, that data is in 2 formats, whether it's a structured data or it is unstructured data. Structured data means data having a particular form in a proper format. Unstructured data which is not having any particular format. So basically it's a language. That means we can interact with the data, how to interact with the data or how we are going to communicate with the data or the system. So this is a language which provides us the feature to interact with system or data. So this is a structured query language. Now what is SQL? So basically SQL is a standard language for assessing and manipulating databases. Basically it is used for access and manipulating the databases, or you can say that it is the way in which we interact with the data. As I told you earlier, that language, basically we all know that thing, language is a kind of medium by which we are able to express our views. Same case, to access the system or to express our views with the system or to interact with the system, we need a language which we popularly known as the programming languages. So basically SQL is that kind of language in which we interact with the data, or you can say the system. It updates data, delete data. Basically it manipulates the data. Manipulation means you are updating, deleting on records or rows. Okay. Next thing, history, where SQL came from. So first thing, it was developed by EF Code theoretically. EF Code is also known as the father of DBMS. Okay. In his paper in early 1970s, he designed that we can store data in a particular format. He presented that theory in one of his research papers. After that, IBM developed it for the prototype of RDBMS R in mid-70s. Then it was earlier pronounced as Simple English Query Language, that is SEQL, SQL. It is also pronounced as SQL, Simple English Query Language, but because of some patent issues, it later get converted to SQL. Next thing, it was officially introduced by Oracle in 1979. First, it was developed by IBM as a prototype for R. After that, Oracle acquired it and then it officially introduced SQL in the market in the year 1979. Then ANSI adopted it as a standard language in 1986. Now, what are the features of SQL? Why we are using SQL nowadays also? First thing, it is a domain-specific language. Why I am saying it's a domain-specific? Domain-specific means it is having a particular format, or you can say that it's a structured format. As I told you earlier, we are speaking about the structured format. We are talking about the databases, the structured format. So basically, domain means in a particular structure. As we all know that relational databases stores the data in the form of tables, in the form of relation. So SQL basically works on those relational databases. Okay, this language is basically for the relational databases and that kind of structured databases which store the data in the form of tables or in a proper structured format. Next one, it's a declarative language. Why we are saying it as a declarative language? Because for suppose I want to find the name of the person who belongs to city Delhi, then I can easily write the query in this. Select person name from table. Okay, where city is equal to Delhi. We are just writing a simple English statements and these are working. So it's a declarative language. It is not like this we have to procedure, we have to write why to do this, how to do this. We are just focusing on what to do. Okay, so that's why it is also non-procedural language. Why it is a non-procedural language? Because in this we are focusing on what to do, not on how to do. One flavor of SQL is PL-SQL, that is Procedural SQL. In that we are focused on how to do and then what to do. But in SQL we are only focusing on what to do, what we want. We are just writing a single statement and the result will come. So these are the points that we learned about SQL. Now moving on towards MySQL. So basically what is MySQL? You can see here the logo of MySQL. It's a dolphin symbol. Now MySQL, popularly pronounced as MySQL or MySQL. Okay, after that, what is MySQL? So basically MySQL is an open source RDBMS. Okay, it is an open source relational database management system, and it was the first open source database which was developed. It keeps the data in an organized format in the form of relations or tables. And we all know that in RDBMS, rows are known as tuples and columns are known as attribute. Next thing is it uses SQL to query the databases. As we are saying that MySQL is a RDBMS. So basically it is storing data in the form of tables, right? So SQL is used to query on the table on the databases to work at the same time. Or you can say that basically it is providing us a platform to write SQL. SQL is a language and MySQL is a software on which we are working. Next, history of MySQL. Originally, it was founded by 3 persons, Exmark, Larson and Whitenius. After that, it was named after the daughter of Michael Whitenius, okay, who was a co-founder of MySQL. Its uses. Now the question arises, ma'am, as we all know that we are having only 10% structured data in our today's daily life and we are having 90% unstructured data. Then why we are working on MySQL? We are learning about MySQL. We have to know about the latest technologies, but it doesn't mean that we forgot about the base. So MySQL is our base, and as a part of uses, so you can see over here Netflix, LinkedIn and many Fortune 500 companies, they are using MySQL in present scenario also. They are working on it daily. Next thing, SQL versus MySQL. Sometimes in board question arises, what is the difference between SQL and MySQL, or what is the relation between SQL and MySQL? So we can take out the relation and differences from these points, as SQL is a language and MySQL is a software, right, on which we are working. So this is a basic relation between them. That language, SQL is that language with the help of which we are working on that software. First thing, meaning, the difference, main difference between the SQL and MySQL. So basically SQL stands for structured query language and MySQL is the RDBMS which uses SQL to perform operations such as strong retrieval and modification of databases, and SQL is useful in managing those relational databases. So first thing that arises, which is a difference as well as the relation between the SQL and MySQL, is SQL is the language which is used to manage the MySQL or the relational database. Now the next term arises, complexity. Why we are talking about the complexity? Because if we need to work on it, then we have to learn how complex that software or that language is. Basically, for working on MySQL, we have to learn about SQL first. Even few people are there which are not aware about SQL. As you all know that IRCTC, they are having a very large database and we are just writing, we need a train from this station, from this source station to this destination. Okay, we are just entering these, but besides that, behind it, we are having a large database which is working on it. It is a basic example of MySQL. They are working, they are having a proper structured data. They are having a very large data in MySQL, and the language which we are using on it is SQL. So basically, SQL need to be learned first to work, and we have to make it sure that we can use it effectively, and we have to practice it a lot. Only after that we are able to work on it. Whereas MySQL is a readily available software, we can directly download it, install it, and we can work on it. In MySQL, we are having two types. One is the GUI, that is the graphical user interface one, that we can easily just put on the words that we need to find the query and it will form the query automatically. Other one is a CLI, that is a command line interface on which we have to work on it. We have to write queries directly. So we are going to work on the command line interface. Because we need to work on the command line interface, we need to learn SQL first. We need to learn about the basics of SQL. Only then we are able to write the queries in MySQL. Now the next one, type of uses. Which type of uses we are having from SQL and MySQL. So when we are talking about the type of uses, so basically SQL is a language. As I told you earlier that it provides the interaction with the system. So it is a fine language, well-tuned language which is used to query a database. Basically, it is the programming language, or you can say that it's a language that is used to query on RDBMS or database management systems, whereas MySQL is a type of software. It is an open source, fast, reliable, relational DBMS software which uses SQL to query the database. Basically, we are having a database. MySQL is providing us a database. But to interact with the database, we have to use a certain language. For suppose, we are talking with a person. Okay, if we want to talk with a person or the Japanese person or Chinese person, so we need to learn about that language, or we need an interpreter who can talk with that person, right? So basically, for interacting with MySQL, we need SQL. Okay, right? If we are talking to a person from Japan, then that person knows Japanese, we know Hindi or English, we are not able to communicate with each other, then that interpreter or the translator who knows both the language will help us so that we are able to communicate with that person. Same case, SQL is that person which help us to communicate with the database or MySQL. Next thing we are having is purpose. So basically the purpose of SQL is to query or to operate on a DBMS, and MySQL allows that platform on which we can handle our data, store our data, modify and provide the delete operations on that database. Next we are having updates. Why we need updates? See children, keep this thing in your mind that SQL is a language. Okay, it's a basic language. If we are saying we have a language Hindi, we are having a language English, French, Chinese, so we are not having any update related to language because these are the basic ones, right? These are having only flavors. We are having a language, we are having flavors of a language. Whereas MySQL is a software which is getting updated daily, right, on a frequent basis. As we all know that the earlier versions of MySQL was MySQL 5.5, 5.76 or something. Presently the latest version is MySQL 8. Okay, we need to keep our system updated. I told you before that frequent upgrades are there with softwares or the DBMS systems, right, but languages are not having frequent upgrades. So basically SQL is having different flavors, right? It is having the basic, it is same, means we are having the alphabets, it's the same, but we are writing it in a different way. We are using Oracle SQL, we are writing it in a different way. We are using Microsoft Server, then we are writing it in a different way. Basic are always the same. Where clause is used for the same thing, select is used for the same thing, create table is used as it is. A slight difference is there between the syntax of those queries, right? So we are having different flavors, but whereas in the case of MySQL we are having different versions. It is a system, it is a software, so we need to update it. Okay, so in our today's lecture we learned about what is SQL, what is MySQL, and the differences and the relationship between SQL and MySQL. In our next lecture we are going to learn about the different commands of SQL, so stay tuned. Thank you.